Thank you. Ms. Holm, I'm struggling with the fact that we've got an island of democracy in a sea of repression. You've got a country which is now seems to be perfecting the control state. Millions of cameras, facial recognition, repression of the Uyghurs, religion, everything, and yet you've got Hong Kong. You've got two societies moving in the opposite direction. Very briefly, what's the solution, or is there one? Where does this end as a practical matter? I mean, as a practical matter, there's 7 million, I understand, Hong Kongers and almost, 800 million mainlanders, whatever that number is. The other piece that I wanted to ask is there any sympathy for the Hong Kongers within the mainland? Is there a nascent, I wouldn't call it a democracy movement, but at least a freedom of expression movement, or is the government in such firm control that's a fantasy? Give me a picture of where this goes.
Thank you. I have no answers because this is an ongoing struggle, but I do want to say that the control state, you've put your finger right on it. A control state is China has built a whole ecosystem of control through the technology, through the law. We didn't even talk about the cybersecurity law.
Most thorough in the history of the world.
And the most comprehensive because it also is built on self-censorship. It's also built on a whole social platforms of community reporting on each other. So there's this whole ecosystem, which is pretty comprehensive, that feeds each other. But the one thing about technology that's interesting is that the asymmetry of power that you could have a very powerful authoritarian state, it has not been able, notwithstanding the mass crackdowns on lawyers, notwithstanding the torture on the mainland, notwithstanding the killing of untold thousands in 1989 of tanks, they have not, the Communist Party has not been able to shut down people, Chinese people, who continue to work for a whole range of human rights. So that's number one. The second thing we haven't really mentioned is that Hong Kong has always been, since '89, the only city, and I will say within formal China, that has over 100,000 people every year on June 4th remembering. It was Hong Kong students, it was Hong Kong journalists who went up to Beijing to support the democracy movement. And there are very moving stories of the protesters knowing that the tanks were coming.
But
they said, let the Hong Kong students, they must make it safely back because they will tell our story.
Can the Beijing regime tolerate Hong Kong? Isn't Hong Kong a fundamental threat to this whole control regime?
Half of Hong Kong is a fundamental threat. The part of Hong Kong that can be its golden goose that lays the golden egg, they like that pot. But that goose isn't living in a free-range farm. And they want that golden goose to absolutely, be like, keep laying those eggs, but, you're going to have no air, no this, no that. So they're trying to do something impossible. They're trying to keep half of Hong Kong denying a reality of who and what Hong Kong is, because Hong Kongers we have had a history of freedom, and we have had a history of working courts and independence. You can't just wipe it. Sympathy for mainlanders. I know, because I also teach human rights seminars at some institutions in Hong Kong, that mainlanders participate in the demonstrations. And I can tell you, when they participate in the demonstrations in Hong Kong, 1 million people, their parents back home on the mainland will get a knock on the door and a visit from the public security saying, your daughter, your son is in those marches, tell them to stop. So they're both in Hong Kong, mainlanders in Hong Kong, are very, it's not just what you see in the media of them fighting and protesting and fighting. There are Hong Kongers who support and are inspired by, that's what Beijing is afraid of. They're afraid, that's why they first censored everything, and then suddenly they realize, oh my gosh, we can't censor it. Everybody actually has those illegal VPNs, and they are getting the information. So then they started doing the disinformation, because the blackout didn't work, so they started the disinformation. The other point is that there are mainlanders from the beginning in June who have expressed support for the Hong Kong democracy movement online. What has happened to them? Arrested, detained, threatened, intimidated, etc. So notwithstanding the full force of an authoritarian police state, they're not able to shut it down. And Mr. King, they're not able to tell mainlanders who do see what they're seeing and who are not afraid and are willing to also pay the price to support Hong Kong's movement, because they understand that if Hong Kongers can hold the line, then the mainlanders who also want democracy and freedom can also have a chance. But Hong Kongers are the front line.
Well, I want to join my colleagues in thanking you all. It's hard for us to conceive of the courage that it takes. There's no doubt that in this room today is someone reporting to Beijing about each of your
That's right.
testimony.
That's right. So please make sure we're stated properly. I don't want any misquotes.
And I want to thank you for your courage to speak the truth. And hopefully we will be able to pass some of this legislation to make it clear to the regime in Beijing that democracy is an important value and that we're just not going to pay lip service to it. Thank you all very much.